We're in the outskirts of Geneva, where many of the watchmaking industry's giants have their offices and workshops. We're visiting Frederique Constant, Alpina and Atelier de Monaco. Last year, Frederique Constant celebrated its 30th anniversary, and this year, just a few weeks ago, they opened an extension to their workshops, almost doubling their production capacity. It's mighty impressive to see how, in those 30 years, Peter Stas and his wife Aletta have built the brand from zero to what it is today, including 29 own calibers. We're going to talk to Peter Stas, president of the Frederique Constant Group, and he's going to talk about the history of the brand those past 30 years.
So we need to go back 30 years. At the time, Aletta and myself, we were visiting Switzerland, looking into the windows of the large watch and jewelry shops. And we saw there these beautiful classical watches, but typically at a price of 5 to 10 to 15,000 Swiss francs. And we were at the end of our 30s. We had just started to work. Aletta at ING, myself at Philips, and we could not afford a Swiss watch like that. We wanted them, but they were too expensive. And then we saw at the same time, because this was in the middle of the quartz crisis, the possibilities to make technically sound watches, watches that kept the time properly, that were water resistant. However, the price was affordable. And then the idea came, why can we not create a more classical design with some of the new technologies and thereby creating something that we liked for ourselves, that we would actually create and produce for ourselves. And that's how we slowly started to work on those first 6 prototypes. This was really a hobby project. And those 6 prototypes, they were all had classical designs, and they all had quartz calibers. They were the quartz calibers that were being offered by ETA, which is part of the Swatch Group. That has always been a way of working in the watch industry, that you have specialists making the movement, making the case, making the dial, making the hands, making the straps. And we went to each of them with our design, which we had designed in the earlier design programs on a PC, because this was also the period for the first time that the PCs were coming alive. And then the specialist maker would make prototype parts for us, and we would build together those prototypes into a complete watch, all by hand, and some of them were not even running, some we had to glue it together, but it already looked like a real watch. After we had these prototypes, of course, we were discussing together what to do next. I took a few days vacation and attended or exhibited those 6 prototypes on a watch and jewelry fair in Hong Kong. At that exhibition, we received an order for 300 pieces from a Japanese wholesaler from Osaka. And that, of course, changed the situation entirely. Actually, Aletta resigned her job at ING. She started to run the day-to-day operation of the production of these 300 pieces. In fact, we produced 350 pieces, which we later on used as samples for the next orders and to get more customers. But these 350 production was our first production batch. That took something like 9 months, and that took time, took negotiation time, took also out a lot of time on the technical side, because making parts for a prototype, you can change some things by hand, but of course for a larger production it all needs to fit together. After these 9 months, proudly we delivered the first 300 pieces to the Japanese wholesaler. In fact, he displayed them in Japan in his network, and they were sold within a week, and he came back and he placed an order for 800 pieces. So the whole machine started to run, and we could go back to our suppliers and show them, listen, you did not only help us with the prototypes, you also helped us with the first 300 pieces. But now we're here for the next one. This machine started then to roll, and every 3-4 months, typically 3 times per year, we would do a production, and typically the production would go up and up every time, which gave us also more samples. We started to have customers in Taiwan, we started to have customers in Europe as well, on other exhibitions. We slowly started to grow the activity. One of the key elements in this whole production scheme was to find a partner in Switzerland, because as Dutch, of course, we did not have any factory at the time in Switzerland, and we were making Swiss-made watches. After a few days we went down with the car and we started to visit with the booklet from the Fédération Horlogère in the car, addresses in Le Locle, Le Chaux-de-Fonds, and also here in Geneva. And we found a one-man company in Troyes, who became our partner here in Geneva, who would collect different parts and who would arrange the assembly in Paquis, which is a suburb here in Geneva, on behalf of us, while we were still living at the time in Hong Kong. And he would send back then the watch head, we would still do some checks, and then we would deliver to mostly customers at the time in Asia. That's an important part, because finally in 1997, when Aletta and myself moved to Geneva, the first office we had was in Troyes with this partner in the same building where he was sitting. We stayed there only for a few months because it became quickly too small. Also, we wanted to have our own atelier and not only assemble anymore with a third-party atelier in the Paquis. In 1994, we introduced the first time a mechanical watch. Before that, we worked with quartz calibers, so the new type of calibers. From ETA, and we were approached at the time already by Celita. Mr. Garcia at the time was the sales manager for Garcia, and we met him and he said, well, you know, what you're doing is nice. We were actually the same age, we were same youngsters in the watch industry, and he said, why don't you also make an automatic watch with one of our calibers? And he gave us the 2846. Which was the thicker version of ETA at the time. And Celita was doing the assembly of this caliber. We looked at that and we asked also him, so you want us to make a watch that is going to be thicker, that will be more expensive than what we already have so far. So how are we going to communicate that? During some evening sessions, some drinks, we came up with this idea to open the main plate and the dial at the position of the balance wheel, so that from the front side, from the dial side, you could literally look into the movement and see the heart of the mechanical caliber. And we called this also the heartbeat, because it beats back and forth. Those first watches again went to Japan with big success. Unfortunately, we never registered this design, and it was quickly copied the year after by others. Until today, the heartbeat, as we know it, is still a signature of the Frederique Constant brand. In 1997 we moved to Geneva, so it was still very small, but then we moved to Carouge. We had our own internal atelier with 7 watchmaker positions. We stayed there for about 3 years and then it became too small again. Then we moved to Cherbourg. There we stayed for a number of like 6 years, and finally we moved here and constructed our own manufacture here in Plan-les-Ouates. So we're here in fact now, this movie is taken in the extension of that, which we opened 10 days ago. But the building next here is 3,200 square meters. That was our own first building here in Geneva. I was mentioning before about the heartbeat, the fact that we never registered it. It was quite an issue because we had immediately people who copied the idea. Once you have introduced a product with a unique design, you are no longer able to register it. That's the law, you have to register it before it enters into the market for the first time. So we were stuck. Then commercially we came up with the solution to start to add functions next to the heartbeat, because we knew that some of our direct competitors could not do that. So for example, we added a module and we called this the heartbeat date. It was a date by hand. The date was then at 6 o'clock and the heartbeat at 12 o'clock. We came later on with the heartbeat moon phase, with the heartbeat perpetual, with the heartbeat retrograde, all based on modules. Module from Dubois-des-Bras, module from Agenor, so all done with existing module manufacturers. Early 2000 we were no longer happy with that. So we really wanted to create something fully ourselves, and that was the start of the manufacture caliber. In 2001 we really started to design, and we did a number of things. First of all, instead of doing everything by ourselves, we started to collaborate with the watchmaker school here in Geneva, the watchmaker school in Holland, and the engineer school. We did that because we needed to bring in a lot of know-how, a lot of things we didn't know at the time. In 2001, this manufacture activity started in all earnest, with young guys from the watchmaker schools who loved to work on a real project, because typically the other brands around here would never let a student touch that. But we found some very talented people there. One of them, Pim Koeslag, who is still here today, 19 years later. We developed over the period 2001 to 2004 what we call the most simple manufacture caliber. Hand wind with only 2 hands, hour, minutes. And then of course the heartbeat opening. And the heartbeat opening, we put it exactly at 6, perfectly centered. And we also turned around the regulating mechanism that is typically on the back side. We moved it around 180 degrees so that it is in the center of the dial. And the regulating mechanism looks very nice. And this way it became actually the jewel of the heartbeat in the caliber and in the dial also of the watch. Another reason was that if you look at the typical ETA-based or Sellita-based heartbeat watches, you see the backside of the balance wheel, which is not polished, it doesn't look nice. But of course with the heartbeat manufacture, since we turned everything around, you see also the shiny, the beautiful part of the balance wheel, together with the regulation mechanism. We introduced this heartbeat in 2004, and again after that we started to develop more calibers. We added the date again, we came a year later with the automatic version, then with the moon phase. Then in 2008, the big introduction, because Pim wanted really to do that, was the tourbillon. He worked very hard on that, on the cage mechanism in-house with some silicium parts. It was really technically very advanced, and that also really put us on the map that we could produce a tourbillon watch with our own cage, so not coming any parts from one of the module makers like many others are doing. Later on we also came with the perpetual calendar I mentioned before, and that was a complete new development that's a little bit more recent because we redid the entire mechanism in a super efficient way so that we can do the assembly in one go without corrections necessary on the individual parts, and thereby also offer a perpetual calendar at €8,800, which is unheard of for a manufacturer perpetual calendar. And that has always been the philosophy, to really find something special and also really be able to offer it at an accessible luxury price. That differentiates us compared with some of the brands in the neighborhood around us, which have been here for sometimes more than 200 years. Of course, we cannot compete there with the brand equity they've been able to build up in the 200 years. However, we compensate that with a beautiful mechanical manufactured product at a much more attractive price, still attracting younger people in general that otherwise would not even be able to afford such complications. During the build-up, during the 30 years, we have been approached a number of times by people who wanted to take over the company. Typically they would come from the large groups, one very specific, but we always said no. We wanted to build the company ourselves, we were happy with that, we were growing every year between 20 and 25%, so there was also no reason to be taken over. However, in 2015 we were again approached almost simultaneously by 2 groups. It was Aletta who told me, this time don't say no right away, at least listen to them. There was a good reason for that. Our children had very clearly indicated that they were not interested to take over the company. We started a discussion with 2 parties, one of them who finally took over, Citizen, and they also indicated very clearly what they wanted to do with us. First of all, expand the distribution. We had, especially in a few countries like the US, a limited distribution, and they were very powerful there, so we saw immediately the synergy. Collaborate on certain technologies. Citizen has solar energy, which we wanted to combine with the smartwatch technology we had developed. We also have a number of mechanical sides, also certain very interesting technologies. So on the technical side, we saw synergies possible. And then lastly, they are a stock-listed company on the A exchange in Tokyo. So clearly on the funding side, this would also give the company a very solid basis going forward. Increasingly, the discussions went into those three advantages of collaboration. Then we had in the summer a third party that also indicated interest. And when you have three parties that are in play, and on our side we had clear indication that the children didn't want to take over. At one stage we said, listen, it's probably better for the company beyond us that it's part of a strategic group. And at the same time also for our own holdings it was much better to diversify like this. So in November 2015 we signed a letter of intent going exclusive with Citizen, and then the due diligence in all earnest started. First May 2016 we had the announcement done, then it's what's called is happening when the SPO is signed, the purchase agreement, and then finally the closing was done in July, quite quickly after that. Since then we are part of a larger group. Citizen also indicated from the beginning that they wanted to leave us quite independent, quite alone, which was fully the case. Now we are in the fourth year of the transfer, and only at the beginning of this year there is one Japanese person here in Geneva, primarily on the communication with Tokyo, on financial matters. But pretty much the strategy and also the whole creation of the new collections is still done in-house here, independently, like we have been doing it for the past 30 years. We're proud that we've been able to do this. We also always say to ourselves, to other people as well, we try to stay modest with it. It's really the result of a collaborative effort of 200 people here, but also very much the press, where we've always had very close relationship with, and of course our customers, our distribution customers. Finally, the most important, our final customers. We've always tried to listen to them as much as possible, get feedback and create actually something new again based on that feedback. And that positive cycle is part of the success. So it's not something that we've done alone. We're proud of it, but we also very clearly see that it is the result of hard work of many people.